Right now, we would like to introduce Diane Darcy, who is here from sort of outside of the Angioma Alliance family. She's, in fact, I think the only speaker who isn't a typical member of our science meeting or of our patient group. Diane is a master's level dietitian, nutritionist. She has 30 years of practice in the field and in this area. She has offices right now in Germantown, Montgomery Village, Rockville, and Woodley Park. And so she's going to share a little bit here about gut health since we just heard about broken guts. She's going to help us hear about good guts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I just advanced by using an arrow.
You can use the arrow or you can use the clicker.
Well, hello and good afternoon, everybody. Okay, is this better? Okay, good. Let me know in case I wander. I do tend to do that. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the gut microbiome. I don't really know much about CCM. That's where you guys come in. What I know about is the gut. I come from a long line of family members who've had gut problems, so it's a real interest for me just to share a little bit about our family. Let's see if I can do this. I got a gift for the holidays from my son. So I'll just use this. Should work? Okay, very good. All right, well, we saw the gift. It was a pillow in the form of an emoji, which apparently I use too much of in my texting to him. Anyway, so it's an important topic to my family. It's something my mother suffered from, and I've got children who continue to suffer from it. So I have done research, and I'm interested in the field. Right now, for CCM, we've got, as a standard of care, surgery and maybe having some symptom management. But what if we could do something else? What if we could have food as medicine? There are definite ways that we can influence the gut microbiome through diet. It is established. What that means clinically is not as well established. So I'm here to tell you some things that you can do. In terms of the probiotics that you had questions about, I think that we're a little bit in the Wild West area. We don't know. When people are looking at probiotics, what they need to look at is genus, species, and strain. So it's not just Lactobacillus casei, it's Lactobacillus casei 0594. Which makes it really tricky to start prescribing these things for people. And a lot of people use a shotgun approach. I think no matter what you do, if you eat a better diet and get some of the things that feed the gut microbiome healthfully, then you're going to be in better shape. It's not going to be harmful, it's not dangerous, and in fact can help in many ways with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, weight management, mood disorders, a variety of things, and perhaps in CCM as well. Oh. So today, what I'm really going to talk about is food as medicine as it relates to the gut microbiome and feeding the gut microbes and what kind of healthy food pattern you might want to try and adopt to get some help in this area. Whoop. So animal studies do point to the gut microbiome as a potential player in CCM formations. And what about those microbes? Let's look at them. There are, and I want you to take this in, maybe you've heard it already, there are 100 trillion microbes in your intestine, primarily in your colon. 3 million, over 3 million genes are in your colon. Over 3 million. That's more than in your entire body. And these genes are doing something. They're making things, they're making toxins, they're making good things, they're making vitamins, as we'll see in a minute. We live in a community with them. So I want you to start thinking about this as a little city in your colon. you've got apartment buildings and you've got microbes living in them, and microbe A might be living next to microbe B, and microbe A makes something that microbe B likes to eat, and then microbe B makes something for the host that the host likes. So microbe A is happy living next to B, B is happy living next to A, and the host is happy as well. So the microbes interact with each other, they interact with us as the host. The host, ourselves, our bodies, interact with those microbes. We do it through a variety of mechanisms. There are chemical ones, there are neurologic ones, there are growth ones, and we'll see that in a minute. So a healthy microbe community has diversity. The people or the microbes living in this city, there are a lot of different ones. They are making good stuff to help each other out. They're worker bees doing great things. There are nutrition benefits. These microbes make vitamins for us. They digest things and make more minerals available. And they also make products that actually feed our colon cells. They feed them, plump them up really nice and thick so that you have really a good environment and the gut's not letting things in that it shouldn't, and it's taking things in that it should. There are immune benefits. So you've got, if in your city all of your houses and apartments are filled with these worker microbes, then pathogens don't have a chance to step in and set up residence. So just by virtue of having a diverse community that's healthy and populated, you're not going to get the pathogens moving in as easily. The next thing is it regulates immune function. So all along the GI tract, you've got a neural network, you've got a lymphatic network, and it's communicating through byproducts with the microbes. Their metabolic benefits. They modulate gut hormones. They can actually increase satiety and fullness, so you might stop eating faster and you might have a better body weight. Modulates some of the diabetes hormones, ones that affect blood sugar. And when you look at people with cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, what you find is the gut microbiome is in fact different. What came first? The illness or the change in the microbiome. There have been experiments where they've actually done fecal transplants from one person to another, not just between one laboratory animal and another. As you can imagine, this isn't done a lot. There was an experiment with someone with diabetes that was in poor control. They were transplanting for another reason, and what they got from the transplant was 6 weeks of excellent blood sugar control. Only change was the fecal transplant. So the gut microbes do something. The other benefits that we have a gut-brain axis. And I want you to think about this because, honestly, I think we've all had, some kind of saying, I have a gut feeling. We have this gut connection. You go into work and you're in a bad mood. What's eating you? I think we've sensed that the gut is related to mood for a long time based on some of the things that we actually say to one another. And it's actually true. They do communicate to one another and help regulate mood and behavior. And people are actually looking at the gut microbiome also for other illnesses like multiple sclerosis, which I didn't say very well, but nonetheless, it's something that they're looking at. If you have a non-diverse gut microbe community, it is going to have vacant slots, so pathogens that you might eat in your food or ingest in other ways can take residence and start manufacturing things that are toxic or not very healthy for your gut microbiome. Can lead to inflammation and also that leaky gut hypothesis. It sounds like you've already had somebody talk about that. Is that correct? In prior? Okay. So toxins and microbes are getting into the body, and the immune system's going like, whoa, what's happening? And sending out other messages, and then things go in a prolonged pathway down the wrong way. Inflammation's kind of the first step in healing something. So I don't want to say it's always bad, but a systemic inflammation that's not shutting down is not a good thing. It can lead to problems with blood sugar, lipid problems, etc. So I want to spend some time on this slide and kind of walk you through it. This is perhaps a representation of what was drawn over there. I'm not so good at drawing, so you've got a slide. I want to look at this from the standpoint of structure, and then we'll move into kind of function. This is part of the intestine, and it's the part that goes from the small intestine to the large intestine. If you look here, this part is going toward the mouth, and the other side is going towards the other end, which would be more appropriate for the poop pillow that I showed you earlier. This in here is the inside of the intestine. And while the inside of the intestine is actually technically in your body, it's really not in your body yet. Anything that you're eating has to get digested and absorbed. Typically what happens is the food comes in. If it's easy to digest food, low fiber, really easy to get at for the enzymes, it all goes in through the small intestine. Then very little gets to the large intestine. The large intestine is where most of the microbes are, and we want them to be fed. In fact, the only way they get fed is through what we eat. If we eat stuff that's easy to digest, they don't get to see much, and they're hungry, and they eat the wrong things. So by changing our diet, we might be able then to feed them happier things and things that they can actually get at, and might make them healthier. So they're lining this gut over here. You have one cell layer thick. Between you and trillions of genes that are making lots of stuff. The gut has two main functions. It has to let stuff in that it wants, and has to keep stuff out that it doesn't want. The way that it does that, primarily in the colon, is through the mucus layer. It's not huge. It probably is 2 layers thick, but you don't want you want to have a nice plump mucus layer to protect the rest of the body from the microbes getting in and toxins getting in. And that's where leaky gut may in part be happening. The mucus layer is demonstrably changed in a high-fat diet, for example. So if we can measure it having a lower mucus layer, and we can measure inflammatory markers, a high-fat diet may not be the best idea. The other thing I want to point out is these cells that are one layer thick are sort of nice and plump and sitting up next to each other. They're being fed by the microbe in the gut. When they're not being fed, they kind of shrink a little bit. When there's inflammation, they can shrink a little bit. And things can get in not just through the cells then, but between the cells. And that's kind of a little bit more about leaky gut. What do the microbes eat? They eat what we can't digest and absorb. So food fiber is really their preferred energy source. And that's almost exclusively carbohydrate. The food fiber is something that we can't break down. Our enzymes can't get at it and can't break it down so that we can digest it and absorb it. But the microbes can. So one thing to know is that the only thing in our diet that has fiber comes from plants. So I've got a question for you. And I've got an apple as well, for anybody who can get this right. What group of people are having a diet that gives you the most diverse microbe community? Any guesses? Raise your hand. This could be. What's that? Repeat the question. What group of eaters have the most diverse microbe community? Vegans. Okay. I think you might have said it first. You ready?
Sure. Now you got to tell me how many billions are in this one.
Well, interestingly, I kind of like this better. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, but I think they're recording.
Oh, they're recording. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm back here. All right, I just threw an apple to the winner who knew that the vegan diet, where you're eating nothing but plants, those eaters have the most diverse microbe community. And the reason is, oh, thank you. The reason is that they're eating the most fiber. Now, of course, you could have somebody eating a really rotten vegetarian diet. That's not who we're talking about. We're not talking about eating pastries, white flour, and sugar. We're talking about eating a healthy vegan diet, and they're going to have the most diverse microbiome. So we have something called the standard American diet. They do all these studies looking at what people are eating and what, give an average. The diet is called SAD, which is kind of a good way to look at it. It's low fiber diet, and so you've got hungry microbes. And what are they eating? They could be eating the mucus layer. They could be eating each other. They're vacating their apartments. They're having a hard time. They're leaving themselves open, or the host open, to having some problems. Usually it's a high saturated fat diet, so there are lots of meat that they're eating, butter, high fat dairy. And that's been shown to help to kind of decrease the mucus layer. Processed foods, and you've heard about this a little bit already. You've got a lot of emulsifiers, salt, sugar, all of these things negatively impact the gut microbiome or the surrounding community and tissues. Produces low diversity and inflammation. Mucus layer compromise as well. So this is an example of a processed food. We can process foods to be easier to digest. In fact, cooking in a way is processing, and I would recommend that you cook your plants for some things like beans. Lectins are high in beans, and when you cook them, they're gone. You don't want to eat a raw bean, so I'm not saying not to process at all. It's just when I think the problem starts happening is when you start adding a lot of sugar, a lot of salt, a lot of the emulsifiers, then I think you start getting into trouble. When manufacturers are making food items that have a lot of water and a lot of fat in them, like ice cream might, fat and water don't mix. The emulsifier is the thing that puts them together. You have hydrophilic and hydrophobic components to these molecules, and the emulsifier is what keeps them in suspension. If you go to make a salad dressing with vinegar, that would be water base, and the oil would be the fat base. You can shake them up and they kind of mix a little bit, but they're going to separate right out. An emulsifier, a mild one, might be maybe like paprika. Just a spice can help emulsify a little bit. It's not a very strong one. If you put something like the polysorbate 80 in there, you're never going to have it separate. When I was in food science labs, we used to use centrifuges to do different emulsions and then try to spin them down and see which emulsifier had the strongest effect for keeping the fat and the liquid together. So it was kind of fun. But this has polysorbate 80. I'm going to just point to it now. That and carboxymethylcellulose are two of the ones that have been implicated in recent research. I want to point out that I think that these are probably dose-based. If you have a half a cup of ice cream once a month with grandkids or your children, I'm not sure that you're going to totally disrupt the microbe community. If you're sitting down eating a half gallon of ice cream, I think you're in trouble for a variety of reasons. Come see me. Mostly processed food has the list of ingredients is very, very lengthy. So I think that might be a good giveaway. And then you can always look at that list of ingredients. If you look at the nutrition facts, you can also see that there's a lot of saturated fat, 4.5 grams. That's a fair amount. I try to limit my saturated fat to anything under 3 grams per serving. The total carbohydrate has almost everything from sugar. The new labels will pull out, this is an old label, the new ones will pull out the added sugar, so you can tell what's naturally in the food, like there's natural sugar in milk, and some of the sugar label there would be that. We doing okay so far? Okay. So, what we want to do to make your gut happier and healthier is feed the microbes. So first thing to do is remove that sad diet. Get away from that unhealthy foods. Start eating healthier foods. So leaner protein, plant-forward diet, unsaturated fats. And what I'd like to do today is primarily focus for time constraints on the plant diet. And the plant diet and diet eating in this more healthy, replaceable way will give you more vitamins and minerals, and that's going to help heal the gut from prior problems. So what's a happy, healthy gut want to eat? Plant-forward diet. Again, plants are the only place where you're going to find the fiber that's going to feed them. It's in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds, plant-based foods. Not going to be in meat, not going to be in butter, not going to be in a variety of other things. So a high fiber diet, 28, 30 or more grams a day. High polyphenol content. Polyphenols are compounds in plants. So plants have been giving medicine, drugs for a number of years. You have, for example, digitalis came from the plant foxglove. Aspirin came from willow bark. So plants have compounds in them that can affect us. And polyphenols give the plant the color, typically. So it makes blueberries blue, it's in tea, it would be in olive oil, the extra virgin where it's nice and green. Those are polyphenols making that olive oil colorful. Polyphenols have direct effects of being antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds, and they're also utilized by the microbes to make products that are healthy for us. Low processed foods, so you're not getting a lot of extra sugar and salt and emulsifiers in your food. You're cooking at home. Unfortunately, in our fast-paced life, this can be a challenge. And using liquid oils that are plant-based rather than high saturated fat foods. This is coming from a Mediterranean eating pattern. This is not the whole Mediterranean eating pattern, it's only the plant-based part. What you're looking to do in this pattern, and it's a healthy one for, it's been used for weight, it's been used for cardiovascular disease, it's been used for diabetes, and it gets the fiber up where it needs to be, as you can see on the slide. So you may not be able to see it so well in the back, I'm not sure. Can you see it in the back? No, okay, sorry. So basically what this comes down to is it says that every day you want to have whole grains, maybe up to a cup and a half. You can have more if your calorie needs are higher, but these would be like sort of minimums. You want to have 2 cups of fruit a day, and you want to have 3 cups of vegetables a day. There are some specific foods listed there that would be high in phenolic compounds, and it gives you a fiber allotment as well. 2 cups of legume a week, and 3 ounces of nuts or seeds weekly. And the total, it varies depending upon the individual food items. Some foods are higher in fiber than others, but it ends up being about 34 grams to maybe 46 with that minimum intake of plants. So you'd certainly be feeding the gut microbiome, yay, when you eat in the Mediterranean plant pattern. By the way, it was listed as in 2019 as the best diet by U.S. World and News Report. So basically what I'm telling you is supersize these not supersize the hamburgers or the fries at McDonald's. Might require a few more cooking lessons, but it's definitely worth the input. Taking frozen vegetables, which don't have a sauce on them, would be a nice way to go. Drizzling them with olive oil, adding in some spices, that would be a way to try to get more vegetables in. It's not just salads. And there are plenty of resources, both cookbooks and online, that can help with that. So tonight I hear you're on your own for dinner, so I thought, since I'm not going out with you, that I would give you an idea for what to do. So we've got a menu list here. So the green tea is there because it's going to give you phenolic compounds, and I want you to have that for the anti-inflammation and the antioxidant. Grilled salmon is going to give you vitamin D, and it's also going to give you omega-3 fatty acids, which are going to lower inflammation rate. Then we're going to have baked sweet potato, and we're going to get fiber from there. The tea's not going to have much fiber. The salmon, of course, is not going to have fiber, but we're going to start to get it with our vegetables. It's also going to have vitamin A value, which is healthy in any epithelial tissue, like that would be in the gut. Then you're going to have salad with extra virgin olive oil and a little bit of vinegar. The salad greens have some vitamin A value, and they're going to have some magnesium, a few other things that your body would like. The extra virgin olive oil, as we talked about, polyphenolic compounds. The vinegar might even, probably not, but might even have, some fermented food kind of capacity in it if it was like a cider vinegar that had the mother in it. Steamed garlic greens, the garlic will be, believe it or not, garlic and onions are quite good at having the kind of polyphenols, and they have some fiber in them, so they're healthy to eat. Fresh fruit and nuts, of course, because you're meeting your requirement for the Mediterranean diet, and they contain the polyphenolic compounds. And the Mediterranean diet does talk about having some wine in the diet. Again, you can go overboard, and then you have to start subtracting the benefit. But there are polyphenols in both red and white wine. The amount to drink is 5 ounces for a woman, maybe 10 ounces for a man. But you have to be cautious because this can hurt the gut microbiome. So again, it's a dose base and a balance. I think it's a personal preference. If you are not drinking now, I'm not advocating that you start. So that's kind of the end of Feed Your Gut, and I am hoping you got something out of it, and I'm interested in any questions that you might have. Yeah.
Any harm with drinking black coffee? I know that probably putting too many sugar is not the best idea, but black coffee.
Yeah. It is. So the question was about black coffee. Is it okay to drink? Yes, there are phenolic compounds in there, and they've actually had some studies that demonstrate when people drink it, it seems like there's a lower risk for, I believe it's diabetes. So yes, it's fine. I think you can go overboard if you have, you always have to couch these things in. Like if you have a problem with caffeine, with tachycardia or something like that, then of course we'd have to revisit that. If you have reflux disease, both decaffeinated and caffeinated beverages seem to be a problem. So you have to individualize a little bit with everything, but for a generally healthy person, yeah.
Would you comment, I've read some different things about light roast versus dark roast coffees regarding, I think it's carcinogens in the dark roast versus light roast. Do you know what the latest is on that?
Yeah, I think dose is important there. Anytime you have high heat or lots of caramelization in the food, you create these advanced glycation end products that have a carcinogenic effect, potentially. Whenever we talk about risk, it's always got to be with the idea that not everybody's going to be at risk. I've seen trials where they've given like 3 dozen eggs to people and nothing happens to their cholesterol for some, but not all. So it always is an individual response. It is something that you would want to limit. So I think, when you do cook, I think it's good not to burn meat. I think it's good not to burn anything, and I think slower cooking is probably overall healthier.
What about yogurt in our diet? What are your thoughts?
I think yogurt's wonderful. I mean, if it has active cultures, it's got the probiotic in it. It is pretty bioavailable. Calcium is going to give you vitamin D. It can be a pretty good protein source. So I am definitely pro yogurt. Yeah.
So by eating the right diet, you're going to have a happy gut, but is there any way of measuring a happy gut? I mean, do they do biopsies or do they
Yeah.
do stool analysis?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, do we see changes with diet and the microbiome? We sure do. The way most people measure the microbiome is through stool samples. There have been studies where they went in and did the biopsies. As you can imagine, those aren't done very often with humans. There's not a big correlation between stool sample and what's actually in the community higher up. We are also developing the metabolomics piece of science, and that's going to give us a lot more detail. If I supplement you with a probiotic, lactobacillus, whatever the strain is, I know that I can say what that organism is, but I don't know what it's doing. So the omics piece is going to tell you what it's making, and I think that's more relevant. So you might take in the right bug, but it may not be making what you need it to make, and that's the more relevant piece. And that's what makes therapeutic interventions so challenging because, you know, there are trillions of these things in there. You know, basically we have the same third. I think everybody has about a third of the same. I've seen that number, and 2/3 are different among people. When you start giving a high-fat diet, within 2 to 6 days, you start seeing the stool change. So the microbes are different. When you start feeding a plant-based diet, again, same thing, it changes. So we can demonstrate some changes through the stool. I can't say what's happening throughout. I can't say that it's colonizing anything. As soon as I stop feeding you a probiotic, it's going to stop coming out in the stool in the same ratios as it did before. People who take probiotics sometimes see a benefit. Allergies are one of those things that I've seen in the literature as saying they perceive a difference. Can't say whether it's kind of a placebo effect or if it's real. There are microbiologists who worry about supplementing with probiotics and conferring. The worst case scenario, honestly, would be conferring a benefit of antibiotic resistance. So if I feed you a lactobacillus casei that can resist erythromycin, then it could, rubbing elbows in the community, pass that on to another bug, which may spell bad news for you. So it is sort of, it feels to me like it's the Wild West. But I think, feeding it well, I think is not going to hurt. And we do see in studies that there are benefits from eating higher plant-based foods. I'm not saying no animal products at all, as evidenced by the menu I gave you, but by and large, having more plants and giving more fiber to the microbiome, so it will encourage the growth of beneficial, healthy bacteria and feed your gut. Okay, thank you, everybody.